astrological developments of Pluto in the last decade. Reviewing the astrological content of this book 9 to 10 years after I originally wrote it brings a sense of pride. To add to my writings of Pluto in the signs of the houses and signs and houses of the zodiac would not warrant any significant or deeper relevance and understanding of its nature than has already been stated. Similarly, I feel that the content of the natal chart aspects to Pluto to be a standalone quality of work that has needed some but little update. I draw little comfort from my comments written in early 2014 in the final 2 paragraphs of the first edition, which I reproduce untouched here. When the hypothetical exponential graph curve of evolution reaches prime vertical, one of only 2 things can happen. The pace of acceleration can become suddenly unsustainable. The pathway of the exponential curve turns in on itself, resulting in a sudden crash and perhaps the whole process beginning again, this time in the opposite direction to the past. In this eventuality, a dystopian future of a soulless population living on processed food, chemical drugs, antibiotics, and endless superficial media in an increasingly polluted environment will only surely lead to a mass pandemic. I wrote this in 2014. However, I also paint the potentially opposite better picture with a greater symbiosis with the earth, an advancement into the emerging soft technology in a way that embodies spirituality and requires more holistic attitudes and a willingness to allow the conscious and the unconscious sides of our nature to combine. When I wrote all of those words, I had been studying astrology for nearly 35 years. Now it is 45. At the time of this book's original publication, Pluto had been in Aquarius for 3 years, 4 years. It is now moving into Aquarius. Pluto had been in Capricorn for 3 or 4 years. It is now moving into Aquarius. At the time that the internet burst into the collective consciousness, I was fortunate enough to have already studied astrology for 20 plus years. It seems to me that astrology and the internet were made for each other. And since the emergence of internet technology, awareness and acceptance of astrology in the mainstream has amplified massively. What was a fringe subject 25 years ago is now firmly established in today's rapidly changing world. The downgrading of Pluto's planetary status by the International Astronomical Union in 2006 has not and should not be reflected in modern translations of Pluto's astrological significance. I'm aware of astrologers who refuse to use Uranus, Neptune or Pluto, let alone Ceres or Chiron, in their chart readings. This is anathema to me. I could not consider constructing and delineating a horoscope without using Pluto. A repetitive and consistent theme in my understanding of astrology is that as a Pluto is discovered, so its archetypes and meanings come into the collective consciousness. Without Pluto, we would not have any astrological reference point to psychology, our understanding of the compulsive and obsessive, our notions of extremes and intensity of behavioural patterns, let alone our ideas of cleansing, purging, detoxing, which in turn leads to transformation, regeneration and rebirth. We would not have any meaningful relationship with our own internal ideas of the dark. Put bluntly, we would not know ourselves anywhere near as much as we currently can with the advantage of astrological Pluto in our birth chart. This is a good place in this narrative to suggest that anyone who wishes to explore the astrological Pluto to any depth would benefit from buying and reading either the Idiot's Guide or the Dummy's Guide to Psychology or some other simplified handbook or guide to the different types of astrology currently in use. I own my own inability to be objective here. One simply cannot unlearn elements of astrology. In the last decade, mainly due to my studies of the astrological Pluto, and to a lesser extent Chiron, which I have come to a much greater comprehension and understanding of, this has led me to a great deal of understanding of the true nature of astrology that is my own, that works for me, and that I would not expect any other astrological practitioner or student to accept. Through regular and constant working with positive Pluto archetypes of metaphorical death and rebirth, along with positive chironic archetypes of holism and integration, I've come to the ongoing conclusion that death, as we collectively have been led to understand it as being, is a fallacy. This fallacy has been imposed upon us over millennia by vested interest groups who use the threat of heaven and hell as a form of control. I suggest that instead, the physical death of the body releases the soul into another dimension where time as we know it in this world does not exist, that there is no death, just a transition of consciousness. I suggest that liberating oneself from traditional mental understandings of death can bring a significantly less fearful approach to dealing with Pluto, seeing the planet as a gateway phenomenon instead of the finality often associated with it. At the same time as coming to this ongoing conclusion about the nature of death, I also went for a personal revolution about the nature of astrology. Simply put, I stopped seeing astrology as an it and started seeing astrology as a she. With that acceptance in mind, it is a small step further on to realise that people do not find astrology. Astrology finds people. And if astrology has found you, dear listener, it is because she wants to work with you. It is only a short step from these assumptions on my part to seeing the uni or multiverse as having a form of sentience. If this is the case, then we as a species are made up of star stuff, i.e. atoms, electrons, protons, neutrons. It is easy to see ourselves as volunteers on planet Earth at this time, with clear mission statements and purpose as defined by the positions of the planets and stars in the sky at the time of our physical birth, i.e. one's horoscope. It follows that those of us who study astrology and work with it have the honour and privilege of not only passing that gained knowledge onwards, but also developing that knowledge for future generations. With these sentiments in mind, I find myself in 2023 with no real choice when it comes to working with Plutonic archetypes and energies. To go along with the mainstream of scientific and astronomical thought and accept it is impossible for a dwarf planet smaller than Earth's moon and over 4 billion miles away to have any effects would make sense in an ordered world. Yet, I have tens of thousands of statistics and thousands of client feedback comments that totally contradict this. I cannot explain in scientifically acceptable terminology how Pluto works from an astrological perspective. Yet I know it does. Pluto/Hades is the eldest of the children of Kronos/Saturn. He spent the longest time of his siblings in the dark after being ingested by his father. The mythology of his youth, or lack of, goes a long way to explaining his astrological archetype of operating in ways that defy rational or logical explanation and always having a psychological basis. One cannot understand, explain, or rationalise Pluto. There is no logic to it. However, one can sense, feel, envision, and know Pluto in a way that defies all conscious explanation, but that is absolutely verified by our own internal instincts and experiences. I suggest here that experiencing the astrological Pluto is akin to an energy field that manifests strongest through our gut instinct, as opposed to any conscious thought or feeling. Intuition is a human construct, centred and originating from the solar plexus and then heading north. Instinct is an animal construct, centred inches below the navel and then heading south. Pluto deals with instinct, not intuition, intellect or emotion. This is obvious in the horoscope, where individuals with a strongly aspected Pluto always have strong bullshit filters, where they instinctively know when something is wrong or right, or when someone is lying or telling the truth. It is easy to ignore these instincts, instead relying on mind and feeling to qualify the world as being the way we want it to be. But by using Plutonic energy, we can see the world as it really is, even if we don't like what we see. This is from the updated version of Pluto, Reshaping the Void, by me, out on October the 10th, 2023, worldwide, but pre-publication signed copies are available from me for a fee. Email me for details.